Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Cambridge Insider podcast. Very excited if you've joined us, and if you're listening, once again, to all of our listeners, remember to hit subscribe, to rate and review, and to drop us any suggestions that you do have for the podcast. Joining me as always, Craig Batson. How are you, buddy?
Absolutely fantastic today.
Excellent. Do you see how I didn't say that you were out in Seattle this time?
Oh, it's like I could have moved anywhere, Steve.
You could have moved anywhere, but by me saying that I didn't say that, now I've basically said it. It's a whole thing.
For the listeners, I am still in Seattle, and it is cloudy, not raining yet though.
Well, it's excellent to have you along with us. And at the Cambridge Insider podcast, as we continue to react to the news in the US that most of the major news networks have called the election. And that Joe Biden will be the next president-elect. Our guest today is really going to focus on that topic in particular as how it relates to international education. So welcome to the Cambridge Insider podcast, Jeannie Jaworski. And Jeannie, just before I allow you to say a few words for our listeners, Jeannie's been involved in some capacity in international education for about 12 years now. So she brings with her a wealth of experience. Jeannie, welcome.
Hey, thanks so much. I'm glad to be here with y'all.
Awesome to have you. Just before we get to the hard-hitting questions, they probably won't be that hard-hitting, so no need to fret about that. Do you mind just giving our listeners a little bit of background about yourself, in particular, how you've been involved in international education?
Yeah, absolutely. So I have been in the field for about 12 years now, and I entered as a first-generation college student who was low income and managed to still fit in 2 study abroad programs during my undergrad experience, and that really set me on the path. So in the past 12 years since those experiences, I've had the pleasure of serving as senior internationalization officers at a few institutions, and that's led me to have the opportunity to lead all international recruitment and admissions and oversee study abroad programs and international student services as well. I also teach and do research in global learning, student transitions, and diversity and equity in education. So this is obviously something that I'm thrilled to be here and chat with you about today.
Excellent. Well, it's great to have you here with us. Let's get straight into it. So, what is in your opinion, what does the new administration taking over sometime in January potentially mean for international education?
It's an important question, and I think it's one in the field we're all closely paying attention to. But by and large, a Biden-Harris administration is great news for international education. So the Biden administration has already released some day one priorities. And so we know that day one, we're going to be looking at a repeal of the travel ban that the Trump administration put in pre-COVID that was largely to restrict travel from countries that were Muslim majority countries. So we'll know that's going away. We also know that the Biden administration will reaffirm its commitment to DACA. And so the program that allows individuals who arrived in the United States illegally at a very young age will now continue to feel secure that they have a path in the United States and that that's not at risk. And so why those don't directly address F1 or international concerns or even concerns related to individuals, our Chinese students around the US studying, it does indicate that a Biden administration is going to look very similar to what we saw under an Obama era administration. And that was great news for international education. We know that international education flourished under the Obama administration.
Excellent. So just as a quick follow-up, it almost seems as if there will be a rebuilding or a part of the goal will be a rebuilding of maybe the reputation of the US as a study destination, as the number one study destination abroad. Is that fair to say?
Absolutely. And I think that, it's really important to recognize that despite the politics, we haven't lost our greatness in the world as in terms of our ability to offer incredible academic programs to students. Really, what's been at risk is the ability to reaffirm our commitment to students that we want them here and that we will make sure that they have paths forward as they go on in their education and their careers after. So that's what we're going to see more of, I think, is that policies that are enacted demonstrate that we recognize the value of international students and international talent in the United States.
That's fantastic. And I think one of the interesting things about, if they reverse the travel ban, you can start seeing, I think this was holding back students from a number of countries from entering the United States even to study. So it should be great to see. Moving on, between now, it's the middle of November, and January 20th, when Joe Biden is expected to take office, what are you going to be looking at, watching to see how the administration is going to handle international education?
Yeah, so you all made me turn off my alerts as I did this interview, and that's probably the longest time I'll have away from the headlines in the next few months. We're really going to be watching and seeing what happens. So as you talked about on previous episodes, there are a number of things out there right now for F1 international students and for students from China that are on the radar for the Trump administration. And so we don't know if those will go forward. Will the Trump administration try to move those forward between now and January, or will they just go by the wayside? So we still have to be ready to implement all of those as soon as they're announced. And so that's something that we will be still continuing to pay very close attention to, and it will very much influence our work in the United States right now still.
Yeah, that's good. That's something that we've been talking about on the podcast. I mean, there's a lot of proposed rule changes that we're waiting to see if the administration decides to implement them before they leave on the way out. I believe, hopefully, that seems unlikely at this moment, but it's always possible. We know how kind of erratic this administration can be. And then, as somebody that works with international students, what has the student response been to this U.S. election news? The students can't vote in the election, but surely they have opinions about it.
They have a lot of opinions. And so the opportunity to offer comments on the recent duration of status policy was one of the options that we gave them to express their opinions. But yeah, so our student response has been overwhelmingly positive to the news that we'll have a Biden administration in January. And again, they see it as an acknowledgement that the United States wants them here and that they're going to continue to support programs that allow for them to continue in their studies and their careers. So things like optional practical training and making sure that the H-1B option is still available after they graduate as well. So it's been great. We've also had students who acknowledge that they feel even more welcome in the United States and more safe in the United States. I had one student who's from Germany, and her family was unsure if she would be allowed to continue her studies in the United States, depending on the election outcomes. Not because there would be a requirement that she returns from an immigration perspective, but just for the security of mind that they had as a family. They were kind of weighing that at the time.
Yeah, I think we're all excited that I know there was talk of widespread unrest that has not materialized. I saw, gun stocks, they were down after the election. So, that was it's always kind of a nice benefit there.
Yeah, absolutely.
Long live the American dream, I must say. Jeannie, I just want to say thank you. I know it's been short and sweet, but that's how we like to keep our podcasts, in particular because Craig gets very tired. I think that's the main reason. Any parting thoughts from your side, given what we've spoken about, but just in general about international education, where we are right now and what we might see?
Sure. So thank you so much for having me again. And, of course, we're talking about a change in administration, but we're talking an ongoing COVID-19 situation as well. And so it's interesting to watch how these things come together and come apart. And so I've really been telling people that I am very hopeful that as soon as mobility is much more possible, that it will be a light switch and not just a trickle. I think that we see that around the world. Students are very much interested in coming to the United States, and we're thrilled that we'll now have an administration who welcomes them with open arms. And so I feel good about where we're headed for internationalization after a pretty rough time period due to COVID and other things.
Excellent, excellent. Hopefully, that momentum will continue to build up the US in terms of what we mean internationally for students. And again, I go back to the American dream. I think the fact that Pfizer have come out with this great news about a vaccine is wonderful news for the world, but it also just proves just how wonderful this country is, how competitive this country is, how international students potentially do, or not potentially, certainly do contribute to things like building out vaccines, coming up with new technologies. So, those are some of the reasons why we love having them here, and then why that diversity is so important. Well, Jeannie, thank you so much. Craig Batson in Seattle. Yes, I said it. Any parting thoughts from your side?
No, I think this is great. Looking at what we need to be watching over the next couple of weeks, potentially what actions we need to be taking to make sure that the outgoing and incoming administrations take our needs and our students' needs into consideration when planning it. I know there's a large number of day one things that a Biden administration will be focusing on, but hopefully on day two they can start looking at international education as well. I know that's something that they'll be thinking about. On a podcast level, I just want to say thank you to everybody that's listening. We're really appreciative. Do subscribe, give us a rate, but more importantly, why don't you send us a question on anchor.fm. You can send us a voice note. You can always send us an email at cambridgenetwork.com. And I'd like to do a kind of a mailbag pod to answer some questions that our school officials are having. So feel free to send that. We'll have Dean put in someone's email address in the show notes, that if you want to send us a question, go ahead and send us a question. Maybe in the winter break or in the new year, we can get a mailbag pod out.
Excellent. Mr. Batson, thank you very much. Just to update our listeners before we say goodbye, Craig's moustache is still there. He has pledged to grow it throughout the winter to keep him warm. If you want verification, you can contact Jeannie as well. She did comment on it a little bit earlier. As always, thank you for listening. Stay safe out there, and we will see you and you will hear us around the next podcast. Bye-bye, everybody.